I'm sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the message on my phone screen. The apartment around me feels different now, smaller somehow, as if the walls have shifted closer while I wasn't paying attention. The refrigerator hums its familiar tune from the kitchen, a sound I've grown accustomed to over the past year and a half of living in this cramped space. But tonight, even that steady drone feels too loud, too present, cutting through the silence like a blade. The message is still there, glowing against the darkness. 3 lines of text that have managed to turn my entire world sideways in the span of a heartbeat. Rowan's name at the top, followed by words I never thought I would see arranged in that particular order, sent to me. "Just try cuddling," he wrote. "Nothing more. Just to see what it's like." I set the phone down on the nightstand, my hand trembling slightly. The motion feels deliberate, careful, as if I'm handling something fragile that might shatter if I move too quickly. My chest rises and falls with each breath, but the air doesn't seem to reach my lungs properly. There's a weightlessness there right behind my ribs, like I'm floating and drowning at the same time. The ceiling above me is mapped with cracks I've memorized over countless sleepless nights. Hairline fractures that branch out from a corner near the window, spreading like a river delta across the white paint. I've traced those lines with my eyes so many times, but tonight they look different. Tonight they look like a roadmap to somewhere I've never been. I close my eyes and Rowan's face appears immediately, unbidden. The way he looked 3 hours ago when he dropped me off after our usual Thursday night drive to nowhere. His hands gripping the steering wheel just a little too tightly, his voice carrying the particular weight it gets when he's working up the courage to say something important. The street light outside his car had cast half his face in shadow, but I could see the way his jaw tensed, the way his eyes kept darting to mine and then away again. We'd been sitting in comfortable silence for maybe 10 minutes, the engine ticking as it cooled, when he finally spoke. His words came out rushed, like he was afraid if he didn't say them quickly they might retreat back down his throat. He said he'd been thinking about things lately. About himself. About what he wanted to understand about who he might be. I remember the exact moment when the conversation shifted. The way the air in the car seemed to thicken, becoming something you could almost touch. He turned to look at me fully then, his eyes catching the amber glow from the street lamp, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Vulnerability, maybe, or fear, or hope. Perhaps all 3 tangled together into something unnameable. He told me he trusted me, that if he was going to explore this part of himself, this curiosity that had been growing inside him like a secret garden, he wanted it to be with someone who would understand. Someone who wouldn't judge him or make it weird or complicated. Someone who would let it just be what it was, without expectations or demands. The irony cuts through me now like cold water. He thinks I won't make it complicated, but he doesn't know that I've been carrying the weight of my feelings for him like a stone in my chest for months. Maybe longer. He doesn't know that every casual touch between us, every moment when our shoulders brush on the couch during movie nights, every laugh that lingers just a beat too long has been cataloged and treasured and replayed in the quiet corners of my mind. I think about last week when we fell asleep on opposite ends of the couch after studying for midterms. I woke up sometime around 3 in the morning to find that we'd shifted in our sleep, our legs tangled together under the blanket, his foot pressed against my calf. The contact was innocent, accidental, but it sent electricity through my entire body. I lay there for an hour, afraid to move, afraid to wake him, afraid to break whatever spell had allowed us to exist in that space together. Now he's asking for more than accidental contact. He's asking to be held, to be close, to explore what tenderness feels like when it's intentional. And he's asking me to be the one to show him. My phone buzzes again. Another message. My heart hammers against my ribs as I reach for it, already knowing what I'll find. Rowan's name, another line of text that will either pull me deeper into this moment or offer me an escape, route I'm not sure I want to take. The message is simple, direct. So, can we try tonight? I stare at the words until they blur slightly. Tonight, in a few minutes, maybe an hour, he'll be here. He'll walk through that door, and we'll have to navigate whatever this is together. I'll have to find a way to hold him without revealing how desperately I've wanted to. I'll have to be present for his exploration without drowning in my own need. The apartment feels too small and too large all at once. I stand up, pacing to the window, looking out at the campus beyond. Students move along the walkways below, their lives continuing in straight lines while mine bends into something unrecognizable. I wonder if any of them have ever received a message that changed everything. I wonder if any of them know what it feels like to have your heart and your terror occupy the same space. I move through the motions of preparing. I tidy the already clean room, smoothing the comforter, adjusting the pillows. I dim the overhead light, leaving only the warm glow from the desk lamp. I check my reflection in the bathroom mirror and see my own eyes staring back, wide with something between anticipation and panic. When I hear his footsteps in the hallway outside, my breath catches. 3 soft knocks on the door, the same rhythm he's used since we became friends. But everything about this moment is different now. Everything has weight that wasn't there before. I open the door and there he is. Rowan, looking exactly like himself and completely transformed all at once. His hands are shoved deep in the pockets of his dark hoodie, his shoulders slightly hunched in a way that makes him look younger, more uncertain. His hair is messed from the wind outside, falling across his forehead in the way that usually makes me want to reach out and brush it back. He meets my eyes for just a second before looking away, a flush creeping up his neck. Neither of us speaks. The hallway behind him is empty, fluorescent lights humming overhead, casting everything in harsh relief. But the space between us feels soft, charged, full of possibility and danger. He steps inside, and I close the door behind him. The click of the latch sounds final, like the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. The night has already shifted, tilted into something new, and there's no going back to who we were an hour ago. I turn to face him and realize that whatever happens next, whatever we discover or fail to discover, nothing between us will ever be quite the same again. This apartment has been my home for 8 months now, though it still feels like I'm borrowing it from someone else's life. The walls are painted that particular shade of off-white that landlords choose because it hides nothing and offends no one. My roommate moved out in December, leaving behind only a coffee ring on the kitchen counter and the lingering smell of his cologne in the bathroom. I haven't found a replacement yet, and I'm beginning to think I don't want to. The living room is small enough that I can touch both walls if I stretch my arms wide, but it holds everything that matters. A thrift store couch with mismatched throw pillows, its fabric worn soft in the places where bodies have settled most often. The coffee table I assemble myself, slightly crooked because I lost patience with the instructions halfway through. Textbooks stacked like small cities across every surface, their spines marked with highlighter stains and the ghost impressions of sticky notes I've moved and repositioned countless times. My literature coursework spreads across the space like evidence of a life lived in other people's words. Novels dog-eared at passages that made me stop breathing for a moment. Poetry collections held open with coffee mugs, their pages marked by the rings left behind. Essays in various stages of completion, printed and annotated, the margins filled with thoughts I'm still learning how to articulate. This is my 2nd year studying English literature, though sometimes I wonder if I chose it or if it chose me. The kitchen exists in a state of careful chaos. 2 mugs by the sink, never more, never less. One is mine, navy blue with a chip along the rim where I dropped it last month. The other belongs to no one officially, but Rowan has claimed it through repeated use. It's cream-colored with a faded logo from some coffee shop downtown that closed before either of us discovered it. He brought it here one night in October, filled with hot chocolate from the convenience store, and somehow it never left. On the wall above the couch, a single Polaroid hangs from a piece of tape that's beginning to curl at the edges. Rowan and I, captured in a moment of laughter I can still remember perfectly. We're sitting on his car's hood outside the library, our faces turned toward each other, caught in the middle of some joke I told about our Victorian literature professor. His head is thrown back, mouth open in genuine delight, and I'm looking at him with an expression that borders on wonder. I've studied that photograph more times than I care to admit, searching for signs of what I was feeling even then. Rowan has been part of my life since freshman year orientation, though we didn't really become friends until October of that first semester. He was studying mechanical engineering with the kind of quiet determination that made other students either admire him or avoid him entirely. While I lost myself in theoretical arguments about symbolism and metaphor, he worked with his hands, building things that solved actual problems. The contrast between us should have made friendship impossible, but instead it created a kind of balance I never experienced before. He's tall in a way that makes him unconsciously duck through doorways, though my apartment ceiling is high enough that he doesn't need to. His movements are deliberate, unhurried, like he's always thinking 3 steps ahead. When he speaks, it's with the kind of measured cadence that makes people lean in to listen. He has this way of tilting his head slightly when he's concentrating, a gesture so subtle I'm probably the only person who's noticed it. Our friendship developed its own rhythm quickly. Tuesday and Thursday evenings became ours by unspoken agreement. He would arrive around 7, usually carrying food from whichever campus restaurant had caught his attention that day. We'd spread our work across the coffee table, our knees bumping underneath as we bent over textbooks and laptops. The conversations would start academic and drift personal, meandering through topics like music and family, and the particular anxiety that comes with trying to figure out who you're supposed to become. The silences between us grew comfortable faster than they had any right to. Sometimes he would fall asleep on the couch during late study sessions, his engineering textbook open across his chest, and I would cover him with the throw blanket and work quietly by lamplight until I couldn't keep my own eyes open. Other times I would find myself talking through ideas for papers while he listened, occasionally asking questions that helped me understand my own thoughts better. There were moments when the air between us would shift subtly, becoming something more charged. His hand would linger on my shoulder when he reached past me for something. Our legs would press together on the narrow couch, and neither of us would move away. Once, during finals week last semester, we fell asleep with our heads at opposite ends of the couch, and I woke to find his hand resting against my ankle, his fingers curved as if he'd been holding on to something precious. I never named what I felt during those moments. I buried it beneath this safer territory of friendship, convinced that examining it too closely would ruin everything we'd built. But the feeling grew anyway, settling in my chest like something with its own heartbeat. It made me notice the way he laughed at my jokes, the way he remembered small details about my day, the way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Now, as I watch him standing in my doorway with his hands shoved in his hoodie pockets, I realize that all of those carefully buried feelings are about to be unearthed. The apartment around us holds the history of our friendship in every familiar object, every shared memory, every comfortable silence we've ever inhabited together. But tonight, we're about to add something new to that collection, something that might change the shape of everything we've built. The conversation that changed everything happened 3 nights ago, though it feels like it could have been 3 years or 3 minutes. We were in Rowan's car, parked under a streetlight that flickered intermittently, casting us in alternating waves of amber and shadow. These drives have become our ritual over the past few months. Aimless journeys through the quiet streets that bordered campus, the radio playing softly while we talked or didn't talk, depending on what the night required. That particular evening, we'd driven farther than usual, following a road that curved along the edge of town until the buildings gave way to open fields. When he finally pulled over, we were sitting beside a stretch of farmland that looked like it went on forever under the star-scattered sky. The engine ticked as it cooled, a steady rhythm that seemed to count down to something neither of us could name. For the first 10 minutes, we sat in comfortable silence. This was normal for us. Rowan had always been someone who needed time to gather his thoughts before speaking them, and I'd learned to wait. But there was something different in the quality of his quiet that night, something that made the air inside the car feel thick and expectant. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than usual. He said he'd been thinking about stuff lately. The word stuff hung between us, deliberately vague, but I could hear the weight it carried. His hands gripped the steering wheel, even though the car was parked, his knuckles pale in the intermittent light from the street lamp. He told me about conversations he'd overheard in the engineering building. Guys talking about relationships, about attraction, about the kinds of connections that seem to come so easily to everyone else. He said he'd been listening to these conversations for months, trying to understand why none of it resonated with him the way it seemed to resonate with them. I remember the exact moment when his voice changed, when it took on that particular cadence that meant he was working up to something important. He turned in his seat to face me, and I could see the conflict playing across his features. Fear warring with curiosity, certainty battling doubt. That's when he said it. The words that would replay in my mind for days afterward. He said he'd been wondering what it would be like to be close to someone different, to understand what he might be missing, what part of himself he might have been ignoring. He stumbled over the phrasing, starting sentences and abandoning them, until finally he just said it plain. He wanted to know what it felt like to cuddle with a guy. Just to see, just to understand. The world tilted sideways in that moment. I felt something inside my chest crack open, a feeling like falling and flying at the same time. I managed to nod, try to keep my expression neutral. Though my heart was beating so loud, I was certain he could hear it over the soft hum of the radio. But then came the part that nearly undid me completely. He didn't want to explore this with just anyone. He wanted it to be me. He said he trusted me in a way he didn't trust other people. He knew I wouldn't judge him or make assumptions about what it meant. He believed I would let it be whatever it needed to be, without forcing it into categories or definitions that might not fit. The irony was sharp enough to cut. Here was Rowan, confessing his curiosity about something I'd been dreaming about for months, asking me to help him understand feelings I'd been carrying like secrets. He trusted me to guide him through this exploration without complications, not knowing that I was already hopelessly complicated by my own feelings for him. I told him yes. Of course I told him yes. What else could I say? That I couldn't help him because I was already too invested in the outcome? That the very thing he wanted to try as an experiment was something I'd been wanting as truth? The words stayed locked in my throat, and I settled for a simple nod, a quiet agreement that felt both like a gift and a kind of torture. The drive back to campus was different. Charged. Every red light we stopped at felt significant. Every turn he made seemed deliberate. The radio played songs I'd heard hundreds of times before, but they sounded new somehow, their lyrics suddenly relevant to whatever was shifting between us. When he dropped me off outside my building, he said he needed a day or two to think about it. To be sure, I watched his taillights disappear around the corner and stood there in the cool night air, trying to process what had just happened. The next 2 days passed in a kind of suspended animation. Our usual text conversations took on new weight. Every message felt loaded with subtext. When he sent me a link to an article about his latest engineering project, I found myself analyzing the timing, wondering if it meant something beyond casual friendship. When I replied with a photo of a ridiculous passage from one of my Victorian literature assignments, I studied his response for hidden meaning. Then, yesterday evening, my phone buzzed with the message that brought us to this moment. Those simple words that asked if we could try tonight. I'd stared at the screen until the letters blurred, then typed back a single word. Okay. Now he's here, standing in my doorway with uncertainty written across his features, and I'm about to discover what it means to hold someone you've been wanting to hold while pretending it's the first time the thought has ever crossed your mind. We move through the apartment like actors who have forgotten their lines. Rowan takes off his shoes by the door, the same automatic gesture he's made dozens of times before, but tonight it feels ceremonial somehow. I offer him something to drink, and he declines with a shake of his head, his eyes not quite meeting mine. The familiar rhythms of our friendship feel foreign now, like a song played in a different key. The bedroom door stands open, and we both look toward it at the same time. Neither of us moves. The space between the living room and that doorway might as well be an ocean for how impossible it seems to cross. Finally, I take the first step, and he follows, our footsteps muffled by the carpet. The bed looks different than it did an hour ago. Larger somehow, more present. I've made it carefully, the comforter smooth and unwrinkled, pillows arranged with more precision than they've ever required. The desk lamp casts everything in warm, forgiving light, creating a space that feels separate from the rest of the world. We stand at the foot of the bed for what feels like forever. I can hear his breathing, slightly uneven, matching the rhythm of my own nervous heartbeat. When he finally moves, it's with the kind of deliberate care people use when approaching something fragile. He sits on the edge of the mattress first, then lies down slowly, his body rigid with uncertainty. I follow, settling beside him with what I hope looks like casual ease, though every nerve in my body is singing with awareness. The mattress dips slightly under our combined weight, drawing us infinitesimally closer. At first, we lie like strangers who have accidentally ended up in the same bed. Our bodies are parallel, but separate, careful not to touch beyond the occasional brush of fabric against fabric. The silence stretches between us, filled with the sound of our breathing and the distant hum of traffic from the street below. I can feel the warmth radiating from his skin, even through the space between us. It's distracting in a way that makes it hard to think clearly. I stare at the ceiling, at those familiar cracks I've mapped so many times before, and try to remember how to exist in my own body. Then he shifts just slightly. His shoulder moves closer to mine until they're almost touching, the space between us reduced to nothing more than the width of a breath. I can smell his laundry detergent, that clean scent I've grown accustomed to over months of shared study sessions. But experiencing it like this, lying beside him in the dim light of my bedroom, transforms it into something entirely new. The first real contact happens so gradually, I'm not sure who initiates it. Maybe his arm moves first, or maybe mine does, but suddenly his forearm is pressed against mine, skin to skin where his sleeves have ridden up. The touch is electric, sending shivers through me that I fight to keep hidden. He turns his head toward me then, and I do the same until we're facing each other on our sides. In the lamplight, his eyes look different, darker. There's something vulnerable in his expression, something that makes my chest tighten with tenderness and longing in equal measure. This is when he moves closer, when the experiment becomes something real. His arm comes up and over, settling across my chest with a weight that feels both natural and revolutionary. The gesture is careful, questioning, as if he's asking permission with his body instead of words. I don't pull away. I couldn't if I wanted to. The warmth of his arm across me is overwhelming. I can feel his pulse through the thin fabric of his shirt, steady and strong. His breathing is close enough that I can feel it against my neck, soft and even. This is what I've imagined in countless quiet moments, but the reality is so much more intense than anything my imagination ever conjured. Minutes pass in this position, maybe hours. Time feels fluid here, untrustworthy. I memorize the weight of him, the way his breath moves the hair near my ear, the particular rhythm of his heartbeat against my ribs. I try to be present for his exploration while simultaneously drowning in my own overwhelming response to finally being held by him. In the days that follow, everything between us shifts in subtle but unmistakable ways. Our usual conversations carry new undercurrents, topics we approach and then veer away from like drivers avoiding a collision. When we meet for coffee between classes, he sits closer than he used to, our knees touching under the small cafe table. When we study together, he finds reasons to make contact, a hand on my shoulder when he leans over to look at my textbook, his fingers brushing mine when he passes me a pen. These moments of touch are brief but deliberate, and they leave me wondering if he's testing something or if I'm reading meaning into gestures that might be innocent. The uncertainty is maddening and wonderful in equal measure. I find myself analyzing every interaction, searching for signs of what he might be feeling, what this exploration might be revealing to him about himself. But underneath all of this careful navigation runs a current of deeper truth. Something has been awakened between us, something that can't be unnamed now that it's been given space to breathe. Whether he recognizes it yet or not, the careful boundaries of our friendship have been irrevocably altered. The question that haunts me is whether this transformation is happening for both of us, or if I'm the only one whose world has been turned completely upside down. The night when everything changes happens 2 weeks after our first tentative exploration. We've settled into a pattern by then, These quiet evenings when Rowan appears at my door with the same careful uncertainty, and we navigate our way to my bed like travelers following a map written in a language neither of us fully understands. Tonight feels different from the moment he arrives. There's something in his posture, in the way he moves through my apartment, that suggests a shift I can't quite identify. He's quieter than usual, his responses to my casual questions more thoughtful, as if he's listening to some internal conversation while we speak. We go through our familiar ritual. Shoes by the door. The brief, awkward transition from standing to lying down. The careful choreography of limbs finding their places, his arm settling across my chest with a familiarity that still takes my breath away. But tonight, instead of the usual stiffness that gradually melts into comfort, he seems more at ease from the beginning. The lamp casts the same warm circle of light across the bed, but the quality of silence between us has changed. It's deeper somehow, more intentional. I can feel him thinking beside me, his body tense with something that isn't anxiety, but isn't quite relaxation either. We lie like this for perhaps 20 minutes, our breathing synchronized, the rise and fall of his chest against my arm marking time in a rhythm I've grown to recognize. His fingers trace absent patterns against my shirt, movements so subtle I'm not sure he's aware he's making them. Each small touch sends electricity through me, but I've learned to hold very still, to let him lead this exploration at his own pace. Then he speaks, his voice barely above a whisper, the words directed toward the ceiling rather than to me. He says this feels better than he thought it would. Not just different, but better. The admission hangs in the air between us, weighted with implications neither of us is ready to examine fully. I turn my head to look at him, and after a moment, he does the same. In the lamplight, his face is open in a way I've never seen before. The careful composure he usually wears has been stripped away, leaving something raw and honest in its place. His eyes search mine, as if he's looking for permission to feel whatever is moving through him. This is when the world narrows to the space between us. The distance from his face to mine becomes the only geography that matters. I can count his eyelashes, can see the small scar near his left eyebrow from a childhood accident he once told me about. His breath is warm against my skin, carrying the faint sweetness of the mint gum he chews when he's nervous. Our foreheads drift closer, drawn by some gravitational force I don't understand and don't question. The contact is barely there, just the brush of skin against skin, but it feels like a confession neither of us has the words to speak. His eyes flutter closed, and mine follow. In this suspended moment, we exist in a space where friendship and something deeper merge into something unnamed but undeniably real. For me, the revelation arrives with the clarity of lightning illuminating a landscape. This isn't curiosity anymore. It isn't an experiment or exploration or any of the careful, neutral words we've used to describe what's happening between us. This is love, terrifying and beautiful and absolutely certain. Love that has been growing in the quiet spaces of our friendship for months, finally given permission to show itself. The knowledge settles in my chest like something I've always known but never admitted. Every late-night conversation, every comfortable silence, every moment when our eyes met across a crowded room and found understanding there has been building toward this recognition. I am in love with Rowan, have been in love with him probably since long before either of us understood what was possible between us. But even as my own truth crystallizes with painful clarity, I can see that his revelation is different. Quieter, perhaps, but no less profound. When he opens his eyes and looks at me, there's something new in his expression, a kind of settled certainty, as if a question he's been carrying has finally been answered. He doesn't say the words aloud, but I can read them in the way he looks at me, in the way his hand finds mine beneath the covers and holds on. The safety he feels here, in my arms, in this space we've created together, is unlike anything he's experienced before. It's not just about attraction or curiosity anymore. It's about coming home to a part of himself he didn't know existed. Neither of us speaks these realizations aloud. The moment is too fragile, too new, to bear the weight of definition. But something fundamental has shifted between us. Some barrier has been crossed that we can never uncross. We both know it, can feel it in the charged air between us, in the way our bodies seem to fit together with a rightness that defies explanation. The night ends without a kiss, but only just. We hover in that space where possibility lives, where the future spreads out before us like an unwritten story. Our foreheads remain touching, our hands intertwined, our breathing gradually synchronizing until we exist in perfect, terrifying harmony. When sleep finally comes, it finds us still connected, still holding on to each other and to this moment of revelation that has changed everything without changing anything at all. Tomorrow, we will have to figure out what to do with this truth we've discovered. Tonight, it's enough to simply let it exist between us, unnamed but undeniable. The weight of unspoken truth becomes unbearable over the following week. Every interaction between us feels like walking across ice that might crack at any moment. Each word carefully chosen to avoid the vast territory of what we've discovered but refuse to name. I watch Rowan navigate this new landscape with the same careful precision he brings to his engineering problems, but I can see the effort it costs him. The question that haunts my sleepless nights is simple and impossible. Do I risk everything by telling him what this means to me? Or do I preserve what we have by keeping silent? The friendship that has become the center of my world hangs in the balance, and I'm terrified that speaking my truth might shatter something irreplaceable. But staying silent is killing me by degrees. Every time he touches my hand across the cafe table, every moment when our eyes meet and hold just a beat too long, every night when we lie together in careful exploration of this thing we won't define, I feel pieces of myself breaking away. I'm living half a life, experiencing overwhelming joy shadowed by the constant ache of having to pretend it means less than it does. I notice Rowan beginning to pull back, subtle shifts that probably wouldn't be visible to anyone else. He starts declining some of our usual plans, citing engineering projects that need attention or study groups he can't miss. When we do spend time together, there's a new distance in his posture, a carefulness that wasn't there before. He sits a little farther away on the couch, his responses to my casual touches becoming more measured, more deliberate. The change is most obvious in group settings. At the coffee shop where our friend circle meets between classes, he positions himself across the table from me rather than beside me. During movie nights in someone else's dorm, he chooses the floor instead of sharing the couch we would normally claim together. He's still present, still engaged in conversations, but he's building walls I can almost see. I understand what's happening even if he hasn't said it aloud. The intensity of what we've been sharing has begun to scare him. Not the attraction itself, perhaps, but what it might mean for his understanding of himself, for the future he thought he was building, for the explanations he might have to give to family and friends who know him as someone different. The breaking point comes on a Thursday evening when he doesn't show up for our usual study session. No text message, no explanation, just empty space where his presence should be. I sit in my apartment surrounded by textbooks I can't focus on, checking my phone every few minutes for a message that never comes. By 10 o'clock, I can't stand the uncertainty anymore. I walk across campus to his dormitory, my heart hammering against my ribs with each step. The night air is cold enough to make my breath visible, but the chill I feel has more to do with fear than weather. I find him in his room, sitting at his desk with engineering homework spread in front of him, though it's clear he hasn't been working. He looks up when I knock, and I see something like relief and terror war across his features. The conversation that follows will replay in my memory for the rest of my life. He tells me he's been thinking, trying to figure out what we've been doing and what it means. He says he's confused about himself, about what he wants, about how to reconcile this new part of his identity with everything else he thought he knew about who he was. I listen to him stumble through explanations that circle around the real issue without landing on it. He talks about expectations and futures and the complexity of human connection. He says he values our friendship too much to complicate it, that maybe we should go back to the way things were before. That's when I break. The careful composure I've maintained for weeks finally cracks, and the words pour out of me like water through a burst dam. I tell him I can't treat this like nothing. I can't pretend that lying in his arms is just friendly experimentation when it feels like coming home. I can't go back to casual touches and comfortable silences when I know what it's like to hold him while he sleeps. I tell him that what we have isn't complicated for me. It's the clearest, truest thing I've ever felt. I tell him I'm in love with him, have been for months, and that every moment we've shared has been both a gift and a kind of beautiful torture. The silence that follows my confession stretches between us like a chasm. He stares at me with wide eyes, his face cycling through emotions I can't read. I prepare myself for rejection, for the careful explanation of why this can't work, why we need to preserve our friendship by pretending none of this ever happened. But then his voice breaks through the silence, quiet and uncertain. He says he doesn't know what he wants from the future, doesn't know how to define what he's feeling or what it means for who he is. But he knows he doesn't want this with anyone else. Whatever this exploration has become, whatever it might turn into, he only wants it with me. The admission hangs between us like a bridge neither of us is sure we're brave enough to cross. It's not a declaration of love, not a promise of forever, but it's honest in a way that makes my chest ache with hope and gratitude. We look at each other across the small space of his dorm room, and I realize we've reached the moment where we have to choose what happens next. 2 months later, we find ourselves back where everything began. The same couch in my apartment, the same mismatched throw pillows, the same coffee table now cleared of textbooks and papers that once mapped out the geography of our separate lives. But we're not the same people who sat here all those weeks ago, fumbling through conversations about friendship and boundaries and the careful distance we thought we needed to maintain. Spring has arrived outside my windows, bringing with it longer days and the kind of soft light that makes everything look like a promise. The academic year is winding down, finals approaching like a distant thunderstorm, but tonight none of that seems to matter. Tonight, there's only this. Rowan's head resting against my chest, his arm draped across my waist, our legs tangled together in the unconscious choreography of two people who have learned to exist in the same space. The television plays some movie neither of us is watching, its blue glow mixing with the warm light from the desk lamp to create the kind of atmosphere that makes time feel suspended. We've been lying here for over an hour, not talking much, just being present in this moment that somehow contains all the weight of everything that came before and all the possibility of everything that might come after. His breathing has settled into the deep, even rhythm I've come to recognize as the edge of sleep. But I know he's still awake by the way his fingers occasionally trace small patterns against my shirt, movements so subtle they might be unconscious except for their deliberate precision. This is something new we've learned about each other. The language of touch that exists beneath words, the conversation our bodies carry on while our minds rest. There was no single moment when everything changed between us. No dramatic kiss, no sudden declaration that shifted us from one thing to another. Instead, the transformation happened in degrees, like seasons changing so gradually you don't notice until one day you wake up and the world has become entirely different. After that night in his dorm room, when I finally spoke the truth I'd been carrying, we spent weeks learning how to exist in this new reality. There were conversations that stretched deep into the night, discussions about identity and attraction and what it means to love someone in a way that doesn't fit neatly into the categories we've been taught to recognize. Rowan moved through his own process of understanding at his own pace. I watched him discover parts of himself he'd never had names for, saw him find language for feelings that had been living in the spaces between words. There were moments of doubt, times when the weight of reimagining his future felt too heavy to carry. But there were also moments of recognition, instances when something would click into place and I could see him settle more deeply into this version of himself. We still haven't defined what we are to each other. The words boyfriend and relationship feel too small somehow, too laden with assumptions that don't quite fit the particular shape of what we've built together. We exist in the space between friendship and romance, in territory that feels entirely our own. What we have instead is this: Sunday mornings when he shows up at my door with coffee and the newspaper, spreading the sections across my kitchen table while I make eggs. Study sessions that have become something closer to companionship, our work spread between us while we exist in comfortable parallel focus. Nights like this one, when the rest of the world falls away and we create our own small universe in the dim light of my living room. His friends have begun to notice the change without quite understanding it. They see the way we gravitate toward each other in group settings, the casual intimacy of shared glances and inside jokes. Some of them ask questions with careful curiosity, and Rowan has learned to answer with the kind of honesty that doesn't require complete explanation. He tells them we're figuring it out as we go, which is perhaps the most accurate description of what we've been doing all along. My literature professors would probably find metaphors for what we represent. Two characters in search of their own story, perhaps, or the kind of love that exists outside traditional narrative structures. But the reality feels simpler and more complex than any metaphor could capture. We are two people who found something unexpected in each other and chose to nurture it rather than trying to fit it into shapes that already existed. The movie credits begin to roll, casting moving shadows across the ceiling. Rowan shifts slightly, lifting his head to look at me with eyes that are heavy with approaching sleep but still completely present. In the mixed light from the television and lamp, his face holds all the tenderness I've ever hoped to see there. He doesn't say anything, doesn't need to. The look we share contains entire conversations we've had and others will have someday when we're ready. It holds acknowledgement of how far we've traveled from that first tentative night when he asked if we could try cuddling, and recognition that we're still at the beginning of understanding what we might become. Our fingers find each other in the space between our bodies, threading together with the kind of easy certainty that comes from practice. This small gesture contains everything we are to each other. The friendship that formed our foundation, the attraction that surprised us both, the love that grew in the quiet spaces between words. Outside, the world continues its relentless motion. But here, in the circle of lamplight that defines our small universe, we exist in perfect stillness, two young men learning that some of the most profound transformations happen not with dramatic gestures, but with the simple decision to stay present for whatever emerges between heartbeats.